you could learn Geezer Butler's N.I.B solo by rote from a tab exactly how he played it on the Black Sabbath record. But if you understand the beginner-friendly fundamentals he used to create it, you'll be able to jam your own bluesy metal bass solos in the same style. So let's dig into all of Geezer's cool ideas, minus the and get you jamming. Geezer Butler was heavily influenced by bass players like Jack Bruce of Cream and Noel Redding of the Jimi Hendrix Experience. These 60s bass players were all about jamming, which is more about making stuff up on the spot while listening to your bandmates than playing a scripted part. Geezer was also a fan of jazz musicians like Charles Mingus, where improvisation goes to a whole other level. And if you listen to Geezer play the N.I.B solo live, you'll notice he never plays it exactly the same way twice. That recording we've all listened to a million times is just how he happened to play the solo that day. We're gonna learn a few licks directly from the solo, but we're gonna focus mostly on what makes them work. That way you can get inside the mind of Geezer and step by step learn to jam your own Geezer style solos. But there's a full tab for the solo in the description. I wouldn't just leave you hanging like that. A scale is just a specific bunch of notes we pick from the 12 notes of the musical alphabet. Each scale has its own flavor, and the minor pentatonic scale is the scale for imitating Geezer and just Black Sabbath riffs in general. You can hear it in lots of their songs like Paranoid, Behind the Wall of Sleep, and The National Acrobat. And here's what it looks like. This is an E minor pentatonic scale. There are other shapes you can use to play this scale, but this is the one Geezer used to pull off this solo. So let's go quickly through one way you could finger this. So start with your pinky on the 7th fret of the A string, that's your root note. Then grab the 5th fret of the D string with your index, pinky on the 7th fret of the D, then shift up to pinky on the 9th fret, then index on the G string 7th fret, then finish with the pinky on the 9th fret, then back down the same way. Pinky, index, pinky, pinky, index, pinky. Even if you missed the rest of the video, which you should not do, if you just noodle around on this scale, it already sounds kinda geezery. Add some bendies and some wah in a minute and you'll be cooking. One more thing with the scale so you can really wrap your head around this solo. Geezer also uses the E minor pentatonic in a lower octave, meaning starting 1 E lower. This is a little tricky to visualize because we're gonna be missing one note, but if we take our scale shape and move it down 1 octave, so down 2 strings, down 2 frets, we can play all the same notes, except that one note that's hanging off the fretboard, which should be a low E, so you can just play that as an open E. So if we glue the low range and the high range together, that gives us this whole area to explore for our solo. Now let's stick some minor pentatonic scale notes together to make our own Geezer style mini solo, which we'll keep modifying in the following steps. So here's our starting point. It doesn't really sound like music yet, right? It's just kind of a noodly mess. That's because these are all good notes, but notes are no good without a groove. Check this out. Sounds good and geezery, right? What about this? It's the exact same notes, but all of a sudden it sounds like horrible music store noodling, right? Or maybe Spinal Tap Mark II.
On the bass, Derek Smalls. He wrote this.
The difference is groove. Even though it's just Geezer playing by himself, we can feel a pulse that we can bob our heads to. And all the rhythms he plays relate to that pulse, whether it's half notes, or quarters, or eighths. By the way, I teach you all this basic rhythm stuff in detail in my Beginner to Badass course over at bassbuzz.com, as well as my favorite exercise for improving your groove. The N.I.B solo isn't perfectly metronomic, the tempo fluctuates a bit over time, but it works because we can feel his intended groove and pulse at every moment, even when that shifts. We feel it because he feels it. Let's go back to our made-up solo. All we had so far was some notes, so now let's give it some groove. To copy Geezer's vibe, we want to mix a bunch of eighth notes and quarter notes. And this is just one way we could do it. And that would sound like this. You can play it with me if you want to. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So our solo is sounding okay, we've got good notes and good rhythms, but it's still missing a lot of that Geezer flavor, which we can get by adding in some bends. A bend means fretting a note and then pulling the string to the side like this, which raises the pitch. You can do it just a little, or a bigger bend all the way up to the next note, or a huge bend up 2 notes. Geezer does them all in this solo. Check out this phrase from the middle of Geezer's solo without any bendies. It's fine, it's a little dry, but if you bend it up, you get way more of that Geezer flavor. If you're a Tenacious D fan, you might think Jack Black invented the bendy.
Dude, I did. I told you to do the bendy every once in a while.
But Geezer actually got it from Jack Bruce. I saw Jack Bruce do it and simply copied his technique. It suited the sort of blues jams we were doing quite well. To nail a solid bend, it really helps to support your fretting finger with the other fingers behind it. So if you were trying to bend the 7th fret on the D string with your pinky, you put down the other fingers and then you have a lot more strength, so you can bend the string further. If you're bending with your index finger, which Geezer does on a lot of the 3rd and 5th fret notes in this solo, you're probably not going to be able to bend quite as far, which is fine and just adds a little flavor without fully changing the note. Now let's put bendies on our solo. So in bar 1, let's do a big juicy bend on beat 4 on that 7th fret note, so get all your fingers supporting the pinky there, or you can use your ring finger. And then in bar 2, on beat 4, we're going to get just a little bend on that 5th fret note, which will be a smaller bend since you only have your index finger. Then we'll add one more in bar 3 on beat 3 on that low G on the 3rd fret. Give it some nice attitude. So all together with the bendies, here's how our solo sounds so far. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ozzy, do you reckon people should click like on this video?
Yes.
And subscribe and ring the bell to hear about new lessons?
Yes.
Sweet, thanks. If you've geeked out on the bass tone on Geezer's N.I.B solo, you've probably noticed there's a kind of weird clacky sound. That's so cool. You can't really get that sound with normal bass plucking technique. So there are 2 geezerifications you must perform. Geezerification number 1, smack the string downwards. This is different than normal bass plucking where you pull across the plane of the bass. You get that smack by coming down towards the bass from above. This isn't good for everything, but it gives a nice aggressive sound if you're trying to cop Geezer or Steve Harris or John Entwistle sort of tones. And geezerification number 2, set your plucking hand over the end of the fingerboard. Changing your plucking position like that has a really big impact on tone, which I talk about more in my producer switch video. But if you combine the downward plucking with the fingerboard position, you can get that cool clacking against the fingerboard sound that you hear in this solo. If you've seen Geezer live, you'll notice he doesn't do this second move. Playing over the neck pickup helps the bass cut through the mix better than playing over the fingerboard. So for live sound purposes, I can see why he'd keep his hand there. But for this studio setting where there's no other instruments to cut through, he used this fingerboard position to get that distinctive clacky sound of this solo. So just briefly, if you listen to me play our solo with normal technique, and now I'll geezerify it with some downward plucks and the fingerboard position. It's got way more of that N.I.B vibe. To complete your Geezer impersonation, we need to talk gear. There are 3 things that'll help you dial in your final N.I.B tone. Number 1, use a Fender Precision style bass. The position of the pickup gives a signature growly tone that just rocks. 2, use some old dead strings, which I'm not doing because I just put on these red strings to copy Geezer. Geezer doesn't use dead strings anymore either, but in his words, on the debut album I was too poor to buy new strings, so they were always like 10 months old. I'd only replace them if they broke, so that's what gave the record that dull, flat thud sound. But you can fake the dead string sound just by rolling your tone knob down a little bit. Finally, number 3, the most fun one, is to get that wah pedal going, which is what makes that wow wow sound. The producer suggested using a wah wah to make the solo more interesting. I borrowed Tony's pedal, simple as that. You don't need to go find a vintage Tycho Brahe wah like Tony Iommi had for $1,200. Any old wah will do fine. I don't even have a proper wah pedal, I'm just using the wah on my Eventide H9 with an expression pedal hooked up. The rhythm that Geezer moves moves the pedal up and down changes based on what he's playing. But if you do a mix of moving it on the quarter note like wow, 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 and on the half note like wow, wow, you'll approximate the sound of the solo. If we put it all together, the minor pentatonic, some grooves, some bendies, the right plucking technique, and a wah pedal, here's our final solo in all its glory. 1, 2, 3, 4. Seriously, pick some minor pentatonic notes, stick them to a rhythm, add some bendies. Optionally, you can dial in your tone and technique to Geezer mode, and then just go do it. Go have fun right now.